Well, we're curious to hear about it, so I'll give the floor to you, Peter, and we're looking forward to your keynote address.
Danke.
Thank you. Well, yeah, then dear guests, dear visitors, dear partners, and dear customers, of course, and dear collaborators of Univention, dear guests, welcome to the Univention Summit 2022. And I've already mentioned that the Univention Summit 2021 looked like this, and this is how it felt like. That is, the feeling was at being on a spaceship in the orbit around the world, sending to the world unilaterally, but having no idea whether what you're sending out is actually being received, no feedback. And we said, we want it to be differently. We try and dare. And I think this is a very good start. And I'm hopeful that next year we can say, okay, now we all are going to come together again and no longer offer this as a hybrid format. And Catherine has already mentioned our sponsors, and I also would like to thank our sponsors from the heart, because I'm really very proud that Univention Summit has developed over recent years into a performance show of suppliers and products that are available in the German market. We have 29 sponsors this year, and this is a new record that we've achieved. This is great. And without you, the summit would not be possible as such. And above all, without you, the summit would not be as interesting, because it's only thanks to you that we have so many different conversational partners, discussion partners for different topics and products. And the ecosystem that has evolved here is really making me happy and is constantly motivating me to further support it and expand it. In recent years, Univention Summit has also developed to one of the most important conferences on open source software and digital sovereignty within Germany. And this year again, and I only would like to mention a few highlights, we've got Bernd Schlömer, Annika Kremann, we have Andreas Reckert-Lotte or Tyson Barker, and I'm particularly looking forward to hearing him. But there are many, many others, and this means that we've got a great program of presentations. I'm looking forward to these presentations, but also to the discussions and talks with the presenters, but also to the discussion which will then develop among the audience. Okay, the last summit has not been 12 months ago, but 16 months ago, and we already explained why that happened. And throughout these 16 months, we can say that also for Univention, a lot happened. Univention was within, or had a situation where its sales grew for the third time consecutively by more than 35%. It sounds like just a figure, but with regard to the company, what happens within it, the structure, and the new people that we got in there, we must say that this was quite a challenge, and I'm proud of the team and the people who made it possible. So, yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. Give us a hand. So we have 36% more staff, but our products also succeeded more and more in the market. So we have plus 25% of systems with official UCS subscription than at the last summit. And just with regard to UCS at school, and Katrine just mentioned how important digitization of education is. In that sector alone, we have 34% more users at UCS at school, mainly within the German schooling system, but also in other countries, especially in Austria and Switzerland. we grew, but we also did a lot of development, that is not that visible. So we have UCS 5 and UCS at School 5.0 means that our platform, the Univention platform, has been put onto a complete new base. And that was a lot of work. So under the hood, a lot happened, and we are still planning a lot. And the details about this will be presented by our new Vice President Products, that is Millie Radmanich, and he will expand on that. But I would like to stress one point, which I think is really great, and that is that we were capable of really making available almost all apps on UCS 5.0, apart from very few, and also to add new apps like XWE and It's Easy. And I invite you to go to the stands and to look at these really, really interesting products. Just before the summit, we put into operation the ID broker, and this is a broker which makes it much easier to offer contents outside of the schooling system. So you no longer need a link between the server, the content provider, and the school system. So for each school operator or each state, or sometimes for each individual school, you had to develop these, but you just need a connection to the ID broker and then to a release of the ID broker to UCS at School to technically have access to other educational content. And this is a major step forward. And with within all this period of growth, we also changed as an organization. That is, in particular, last year, we very much talked about our culture. We have really written it down again. We completely redesigned our offices and made sure and optimized them for a new form of collaboration, because we believe that people will not be at the office every day, but they still want to be able to talk to each other. And this is something that we would like to promote. But also within management, we have now a more broader basis. I said that Mr. Millie Radmanich, who is the manager of products, has been with us since March, and since May there's also Corona Pence. She's the vice president for sales and marketing. And in particular, I'm happy that I myself, since the beginning of the year, I'm not the sole managing director of Univention, but my partner and colleague in the development of Univention, that's Stefan Bormann. So he is joint or second managing director of Univention since the 1st of January 2022. And this means also that we have more default security and offer you more availability. Okay, and we've turned 20. And also, this was an event that we could only celebrate virtually or in a very small group of people. And I'm looking forward to somehow celebrating this in an appropriate way tonight. However, for myself, I must say that we still have a bit of a start-up feeling, which, however, is no longer justified after 20 years. And when in autumn we asked ourselves what could be the slogan for the next Univention Summit, then we thought that quite a lot of nasty things are happening in the world. We are still very impressed and are still impacted by the COVID crisis and the major difficulties which had been around and are still around when you think about the digitization of the educational system, which have become even more apparent thanks to the COVID crisis. And we talked about digital sovereignty already, and we have seen the negative impact that the dependency of the hyperscalers shows, and we're not at all satisfied with the digitization of administration and the progress of digitization in Germany and Europe. And then you come to shit happens, and then you can play with word and just turn it to shift happens. And by this, we wanted to express that all these annoying things, these challenges, can always be addressed in a never waste a good crisis. So that means to move forward and to finally pursue change and move towards change. And that is what we wanted to express. But many, what we could have already thought about, at the time, there were initial signs, but we didn't think about it. But what is really extremely disturbing is an event for which the term shit happens is not even appropriate, and that's the war in Ukraine. There's a brutal and bloody attack war that is taking place in the midst of Europe with all the atrocities that you can think of. And this war is causing such an endless amount of suffering that most of us here in the room cannot even dare to imagine. And I had been pondering whether I should even address this topic in this keynote, because it's such a dramatic event. But I thought about it, and then I thought, and I want to expand on this a bit here, because that also has a dramatic impact on how we will think about infrastructure and information technology in the future. And this is our topic, and this is why we have to look at it. And I think we only get a slight idea as to how this war will lead to completely different changes as to what COVID brought us. So far, well, we can say that in Europe and in other parts of the world, we had global trade, global networking, and this was massively pursued. We had very expanded supply chains with dependencies, which to some extent were not even understandable. And we noticed it under COVID when there was the problem of getting masks, and that might have been very annoying. But then it was about chips and other components for our industry, and this is still a major problem today. So German industry has so many orders in the order book, but they cannot really supply because they can't produce, because there are no supplies. And in the development of this global dependency, we always and consciously we work together with states, or I would say leaderships, state leaderships, for whom we've known or should have known that they pursue goals which are not our goals, and that they, to some extent, actively work on pursuing their own goals which speak against our goals. And the slogan, the idea was change through trade. So interlinking or having links with these countries economically, we wanted to link these leaders and these states to us, and thus creating a situation where we would say, well, they are also dependent on us, so they cannot really harm us that much. By now, however, we see more clearly than ever before that this approach failed completely, and that we are the only ones who are suffering the dependencies. For COVID, we're talking about masks and chips. Now it's mainly gas and crude oil that really hurts us most painfully and makes us feel to which extent we are limited in our possibilities to act, to which extent we are limited in doing what we want to do and what would be right. And I fear that the situation will not stop at gas and crude oil, but we will talk about cereals, and we will talk about oil and other tensions will come up. And bringing all this together, that is understanding that the basic assumption that we had in global trade with people who do not pursue our goals, and the dramatic situation that we experience in dependencies, plus the brutal war, which we, or at least I myself, would never have been able to imagine, all this led to a shift of era or epoch. And this is really doing something with us. Suddenly we've got the feeling that friend and enemy, good and bad, apparently it's much easier to differentiate them than as what it was in the past. And to some extent, this might be good, because it's good that imperialistic despots who are really threatening the world, that we really position ourselves clearly against them, and that we try to find actions and attitude against them. However, we also have to make sure and understand that we do not fall back into old nationalistic patterns of thought, which to some extent also cause such fights. We should not forget that these are not the Russians who are our enemies or others who are our enemies. In Russia, there are many, many people who share our values, and the same is true for Americans. The Americans are not all Americans are enemies. We're always talking about people, and people, individual people who are doing these really shameful acts, and we're not talking about people in general. And okay, maybe this is or should not be part of an IT Congress, but I believe that it's still important. But again, those who are in power in Russia, they represent values which are not ours, and they really brutally counteract against our values. And this is leading to fear. And in me personally, and I think for many in the room, there is this fear that one would say, yes, a war can become or is possible. And maybe even for us at home or within our immediate vicinity, a war is possible, and that causes fear. And the consequence can only be that on the one hand, we'll do everything to protect our values and to prevent war and to create peace and to keep war interactions as little as possible. However, we can no longer believe that we will always be able to achieve this. And then we have to rethink our infrastructure. Supply infrastructure has to be protected in a very different way. We have to deal with it differently. And this has then a lot to do with the digital world. And this is why we also need a change of time with regard to the digital world. We need different control possibilities within this digital world. We have to be able to control ourselves, who has access to data in this digital world, and we also have to be capable to shape the digital world ourselves, because the digital world is the basis for basically everything, for our private communication, for the functioning of the economy, for all processes in administration apart from the facsimile, and also for the safeguarding of our democracy. And if we cannot shape and control this, then we will not be able to control our society, economy, and our state. And what that means can be really read in this book, Blackout, that is once the digital fails, then the economy, the state, and the society fail. And then we will no longer be able to live together as we're living together today. And this is why when these wars like in the Ukraine, The first step is to attack the digital systems of the country that is attacked, trying to bring them down or trying to bring the systems to act against their owners. So we have to say that the overall conditions have changed. So we have to prepare for very different economic confrontations as we had them in the past. We have to prepare for warlike actions that become more likely than what we would have thought in the past. And we even, or I would say we cannot completely exclude a situation that such actions and fights can also happen at our home. And this is why we need to be able to design and control our infrastructure. But then you can say, okay, but we've got allies, and this is right, and it's super great to have these allies. But closing off will lead into a bottleneck. And many of us who come from the open source community, we know very, very well that it's only that through international collaboration we create connections, create understanding for each other. And above all, we have experienced what we can achieve together, something we would never have achieved if we had stayed in our national silos. Linux, the internet, all this would not have been possible if that had been created in individual countries. It's only through international collaboration that this has become possible, and this is why it's so important. And it's good that we've got such great allies like Emmanuel Macron in France or Joe Biden in the United States. But we also know that this could change at any time. In France, there were just 8% away from a female president that probably would not have shared our values. And what has happened in the United States and what might re-happen again, this is something that we're all aware of and that I don't have to reiterate. And this is why it's so important to have alliances. But we have to have alliances on an equal footing. We cannot just be in a situation where we blindly follow what our alliance partner tells us to do. We have to be able to say no. And just as little, we should rely on platforms to do our communication. Maybe we can regulate them to a certain extent, but they cannot be controlled and steered by us, and they are not democratically legitimized and controlled by us. And that such platforms can turn towards the positive or negative, and I don't want to judge this, but this is the discussion about Twitter. So it's good to have the algorithms in open source, and it might be even right to allow everybody to have his, her say, even if these enunciations will not be pushed forward through advertising algorithms. But the point is that this is outside of the democratic discourse. It's one rich person who decides. And there are many of these platforms, not just within the area of communication, but hyperscalers control for many areas of the economy, and in many parts of the world, they control the access to information technology. That is the access to the resource that we said we need to be able to develop the state, the society, and the economy. They control who can do which innovation and who can offer it to whom at which price. And this really leads us into an enormous amount of dependency. And this is a discussion that we had already had prior to the COVID pandemic, prior to the Ukraine war. That is the discussion about digital sovereignty. And this is important in order to reduce dependency, in order to be able to communicate on an equal footing, to be able to say no, and also to have a trustworthy communication and to know it's only me and my communication partner are having an access to the data. Nobody can falsify them in between. The communication is secured, but also to be able to shape, to create change, and in order to secure innovation and competitiveness. And finally, and this is something that we have discussed within the COVID pandemic, and this is even more important now, to create resilience. And resilience means that I will react to a situation which I cannot predict at all, and that I react to the situation in a way of which I didn't even knew in advance that I would be wanting to react in such a way. And this can only happen if you have the possibility to create your own scope, and this is why you need the sovereignty. And Anne-Catherine asked me in advance, or earlier on, I really believe that the state has a particular role when it comes in creating digital sovereignty, and this is for three reasons. The state is very much important for designing its own communication processes and also protecting the citizens' data. But the state has also the highest IT budgets. So if you take the overall procurement power of the state and brought it together, then it would not be any problem at all to create digital sovereignty. And it would, at the end, even be more cost favorable. And we have to make sure that, or create a way that procurement processes are designed in such a way that we can really achieve this and do it. And finally, the state bears the responsibility to really create resilience and security within the economy through regulations. By this, I do not mean chat control, but really good regulations. This is what we had before. So thanks to Niels. Niels found these great visuals because we really believed that now with this new government, everything will be fine. Okay, this is never the case, but we thought that things would improve. And now we've already reached a point that, yes, a few things will be brought forward. There are a few peanuts that they show us, but what we really need, that is a different type of procurement and not just support, not helping people writing better applications, but digitally sovereign systems for the state, and to ask for this and to ask for offers. This is something that we do not see yet, and we are really not happy about this situation. And instead, many within government look at these so-called sovereign clouds that the hyperscalers offer. That is proprietary Microsoft or Google, or maybe in future AWS cloud will go to the computer center and will be managed by the computer center in Germany. And then one thinks one could prohibit, for example, to the German operators to allow MSA in, but they forget that these systems get thousands of patches every day. And I ask, who should check these thousands of patches? And each individual patch can introduce a backdoor, and they overlook that staff is needed also for the manufacturer to be able to work on the systems. And above all, they forget that there are no possibilities to shape the system because this is proprietary software, a software that we do not understand at all, that we cannot change at all. So this is the Microsoft Server 2018 enlarged, and this for our computer system, and this will not give us any digital sovereignty, but the name is great. Thank you.
The real solution, the right way to build IT, has been known for a long time. Maybe we may remember, well, I don't remember 1973. I was 4 years old back then, but that was when the internet first was invented and when DARPA and ARPA were working on it to create an open, federal system that can be used by different instances independently, a network where everybody have their own nodes under their own control, being capable to read and modify the code, communicating with each other via different pathways. We shouldn't forget that the idea behind it was a military one. It was also about creating a network that is insulated, that will keep functioning if individual nodes fail, because there's always different pathways, and because it is not a network that has a central node that controls everything, controlling the data flow, which can be switched off in order to switch off the ability of an entire state to act. And that is what the idea behind the internet was, to be open, and therefore it's competitive, designable, and controllable. And it is good. It's a good thing that there is a large number of initiatives who hark back to this approach, who work on it, and who promote it. And it is, of course, myself with Univention, and personally, I'm involved in a number of such initiatives, promoting them. First of all, let me mention Gaia X, with a lot of criticism. Many in the press said Mr. Altmaier, the former Minister of Economic Affairs in Germany, decided that Gaia X will be created, and half a year later we still don't have an independent European Dropbox. This is a failure of politics again. But what you forget is that standards are created where services are created that are federal and that can access data. That's why I've defended it, and I think it's the right way. And this is why I'm looking forward to having the first components of Gaia X starting being operational so that it can be used now. But that's not enough, of course. Below it, you need a cloud infrastructure that needs to be equally open, where we need to be able to verify, to check, where we must not be dependent on individual operators. And that is why we created the sovereign cloud stack, and we're very happy that we got significant subsidies by the Ministry of the Economy, and we are now capable of simulating this. And there are numerous productive instances where you can buy this. And I can only recommend that you take a look at it as Univention. But you're, of course, stuck in our identity management cloud stack project. And we're working on the creation of a sovereign administrative workplace. That's the Phoenix project that has also made more progress than you would suspect. I have read recently that 90,000 users are already using Phoenix productively, so we've made a lot of progress already, even though there's still a lot of progress to be made. And with the possible project, we are working with Jonas, with Bechtle, and some others to bring all of these things together. SPS, Gaia X, Phoenix. We want to make them possible, and we want to make it possible for the services that compose Phoenix can be made available and federated via Gaia X so that users can have a secure access to data to process them with these services. And this project started on the 1st of January now. And the same strategy is what we pursue in the field of education. I had already spoken about the ID broker, and the idea of an easier login to educational content is something that we've been pursuing for a long time at Univention. For a long time, we believe that digitization in education is also hampered by the fact that usually access to content of educational nature requires identity authorization. So the identities from the schools need to be tied into the various offerings, but with the landscape that we have today, 16 states, thousands of schools, of school boards, and tens of thousands of schools, there is no way of achieving that in an easy way. That is why we have promoted the ID brokerage service, and a service that would handle identity management. And I'm very happy that the states should have understood that, and that they should have placed the order to make such a service, to create such a service. But again, here, federability is necessary, interoperability between the various components. And the ID broker is not a competition. It is supposed to replace a lot of things. We want VIDIS to be successful because it's as simple as it. If schools and school boards can use identities in a comprehensive manner, they need a good open source identity management system for schools, and that's why we have it in our portfolio. And we believe that via the combination of ID broker, which can offer some things more than VIDIS can, that both of them together will be the best solution to achieve all of these objectives. In the Colibri project, we have inserted these ideas. There's a prototype now, and the Ministry of Research will determine now how we will proceed going forward. And then there's the educational login of the Educational Media Association. That is the login allowing you access to the books of the educational publishers. And we are in the process of building such an access, such a login with UCS. We also need to have license management, which needs to be tied to identity management. Now our promise, our target is to ensure that no matter which system is used to make a service available, no matter which school board, which school, which state first uses them, it must be possible to access all of these different services. These are many different projects, but they all pursue our common joint vision. It's about creating an open, generally accessible, open source platform that any organization can use, allowing each organization to operate IT under their own control and to shape it under their own control, without vendor lock-ins, free of any gatekeepers that say you can't use such and such an application with this system, excluding, of course, technical incompatibilities. And here, we really have made good progress. UCS at school, the ID broker, Phoenix, all of this is being used by millions of users today in a productive manner. But we still have a long way to go. Technically, there's still a lot of things to be done. We'll hear more about that later on. I'll just give you a few buzzwords: further containerization of the platform, better federation, better integration of the apps in the App Center with each other, and also with UCS. And with all of this, we will keep focusing on our core competence, which is identity management, as powerful, as far-reaching, as far in the interest of the organization as possible. It's about integration and making available of applications. And it is the creation of the possibility as best as possible for you, for the partners, for the ecosystem to use this platform and to make applications available as good and as easy as possible. This is what we would like to continue working on, and I believe that if we have learned one thing with the corona crisis and this terrible, terrible war, then it is that the creation of an actually controllable and designable IT infrastructure has always been important, that it has become even more important now, and that we need to work on it. And I'm looking forward to going down this route in the years to come with you. This is why I'm looking forward to the summit. I'm looking forward to the exhibition that we put up yesterday, that we fill it with life today, that we have many discussions, develop many new ideas. And as Anne-Catherine has said already, that we should get strong together to promote this idea. Thank you very much.